Om Tat Sat. My humble prostrations to the all-pervading Brahman or God, to my worshipful Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayananda Maharaj, to all the sages and saints, and to each of you, divine soul, watching today's satsang. So today we will be studying Sutra number 55 from the Raja Yoga Sutras of Patanjali Maharaj, Vibhuti Pad. And this is the last sutra of Vibhuti Pad, 55, last one. And tomorrow we will be starting a new chapter, and that's the final chapter of the Raja Yoga Sutras. It will be Kaivalya Pad. So let's get started on this last sutra of Vibhuti Pad. It is Sattva Purushayoha Shuddhi Samye Kaivalyam. Again, Sattva Purushayoha Shuddhi Samye Kaivalyam. Meaning, when a yogi discovers the similarity of purity between the chitta and the purusha, he attains liberation. So this sutra presents the goal of the psychic powers, all the siddhis, all the vibhutis we are getting. What is the end goal? This is where sage Patanjali is ending this chapter, that once we know that our chitta becomes totally pure and it looks like the self, that is the goal, because only then do we get realization, self-realization, nirvana, purity, all that. So a true yogi discovers the powers of the mind with the sole purpose of attaining freedom from the clutches of matter, maya. Maya or Prakriti is the reason of our birth and death, because of our illusion and our getting trapped in the senses, mind, objects, time and again. And therefore, to cut that process down, a yogi focuses on the core instead of focusing on the siddhis or the psychic powers he gets from his practices. Discriminative wisdom or intuitive wisdom born of samadhi is the highest power attained, pragya, by which he tears the veil of ignorance and realizes his essential nature of the Purusha or the Self. And remember, this ignorance is deep rooted, it has been coming since many lifetimes. So therefore it's not so easy to tear that veil, but once it is torn, it is the avidya aspect, lack of real knowledge of the atma. And once that comes, then the yogi is able to see his purusha, see the consciousness and the self in perfect clarity. In the previous two sutras, it has been shown that the subtle intellect of a yogi is able to tear down the illusion of space and time. We covered those in the past sutras. And as a result of such penetrating insight, the chitta of a yogi becomes profoundly purified and becomes free from the impressions of the kleshas or the afflictions. And you know those five kleshas: avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha klesha. We have covered those in many sutras in the past. So by now you know that those are the fundamental impediments that are stopping our progress, and we have to win over them. We have to understand how they come up: attachment, hatred, fear of death, and ignorance and ego. These are the five kleshas. The chitta then reveals the purusha without any distortion. So initially, when we have all these kleshas, we see a mixed image of the self in the chitta, and therefore the self also gets mesmerized and deluded. But now that the self is able to see the chitta clearly and see it like itself, exactly pure, it no longer has any more interest in the world process. So very deep sutra to understand. Chitta and Purusha both then shine with the same purity. In other words, that's why we say give up anger, give up greed, give up lust, purify, shine the vessel inside, make it look similar to the chitta. So as it were, and in this state any confusion between the two is destroyed. The purusha sees itself fully revealed in the chitta and thus turns away from the latter. A yogi has no need to use the mirror of mind to see his deeper self anymore, because the mind that was initially reflecting the reflection of the chitta coming through the self, and now the self is directly perceived. He develops dispassion even towards the chitta as well as towards prakriti, of which chitta is the proximate evolute. So he is able to see through all this illusion. Such a dispassion is termed paravairagya, or supreme dispassion. So when this arises, the yogi is at a very advanced stage. He is no longer part of the worldly process. He has detached himself due to vairagya or dispassion. So it's very easily narrated, these sutras, but to apply them, it takes a lifetime. We have to continue doing these things day after day in small increments and with persistent determination and effort for us to see these kind of results. So by the force of paravairagya, or supreme dispassion, he then experiences nirodha samadhi. Nirodh means totally pure, there is no contamination, and the cessation of the modification of the chitta. So the chitta can no longer be modified because the lake becomes totally still, if you will, totally clean and pure, and the reflection of the self is identical to the self itself. So the fire of intuitive wisdom then destroys the forest of accumulated karmas from the depths of his causal body. As we know, we have three bodies: physical, astral, causal, and in the causal is where the avidya resides, ignorance, and then slowly with the fire it is gone. The accumulated karmas are totally burnt up or destroyed, and that is the end of the termination of the cycle of life and death. No more birth, no more death, and to be united with God. That is the essence of the benefit, the result of all the practices, penance, tapasya that a yogi does to get to this state. For this state, he has given up all the siddhis, all the psychic powers, and so on. Many people get distracted with that, but Sage Patanjali continues to warn us that move on and do not let these things hold you and distract you from your mission. So, liberation, that is the goal, which will be elaborated. We will cover more. Kaivalya means reaching that state of mukti or liberation. So, we will be covering that much more in the next chapter. So, we have concluded the third chapter in its entirety, each shloka at a time. And this was the conclusion of Vibhuti Pad. This is Swami Nikhilananda. Om Tat Sat.